Hello. Can you guys hear me? All right. Good evening and welcome for coming out tonight. I'm Alyssa Billmeyer and I am a student in the College of Public Health and the College of Pharmacy. I currently serve as the president of the Graduate and Professional Student Government here at the University of Iowa. And on behalf of GPSG, the Graduate Student Senate, and the Graduate Council, it is an enormous pleasure of mine to be able to welcome you all to the first annual State of the Grad School address. In just a few moments, I will have the distinct honor of welcoming Provost Keller to the podium. But before I do so, I'd like to speak about why we felt it was appropriate to address the state upon which this college stands. In pursuing its mission of teaching, research, and service, the University of Iowa is constantly seeking ways to advance global impact amongst our diverse programs, all while educating the next generation of scholars and leaders to ensure their success and professional fulfillment. With increasing societal demands to ensure the high value of the graduate degree, especially from this university, now seems better than ever a time to reflect internally upon our student success and where our degree programs stand as a college. Who better than to lead us in this discussion than our Associate Provost and Dean of the Graduate College, Dr. John Keller. Dean Keller has been actively engaged in the University of Iowa since he first stepped foot here over 25 years ago. Dean Keller has been a strong proponent of innovation and advancement of our graduate programs at the University of Iowa. He strives to help students secure jobs that will impact society as a whole by providing them with high-quality education and research opportunities. During his time here, Dean Keller has made it his mission to enhance innovation, incentives, and opportunities for students to ensure their success in their academic and research careers. On that note, it is my pleasure to hand the podium over to the University of Iowa's Executive Vice President and Provost, Dr. Barry Butler, who will discuss more about tonight's event. Thank you, and thanks again for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Alyssa. I think we should all be very proud of our student leaders, particularly in the graduate and professional student government group, as well as the undergraduates. But they're the ones that really are driving the conversations and having the leadership from the student perspective. So, Alyssa, to you and your fellow elected officials, thank you very much for what you do. I want to welcome everyone here tonight and take an opportunity to introduce Dean Keller in just a moment. Before I do, I want to say a few words about graduate and professional education here at the university, and John will touch on it from a national perspective as well. It really is an identity that we have that very few schools in this country have, or for that matter in this world. We're one of a small number of AAU universities, in fact, that have such a comprehensive set of programs, but also have them all in one, for the most part, in one location. Combined with an incredible academic health center across the river. When we put all that together, we are very unique in this country. It's thanks to these graduate and professional programs that we enjoy a national and international reputation. The university has a very long tradition of excellent graduate and professional programs. As I mentioned earlier, we're one of a very small group of AAU universities in this country, one of 64 that share this distinct honor. We're honored for that because it brings together schools like schools, peer schools, that have similar goals, similar objectives, and use their graduate and professional programs to not just advance the institution, but advance society as a whole. And that's a heavy expectation we have of us, but that's who we are as an AAU university. And out of that, we produce the scientists, the scholars, the future faculty members, and leaders of this country. And so we're very proud of that. More than 3/4 of our graduate programs are among the top 30 such programs at public universities across the nation, and 8 of those are in the top 10. So we have an awful lot to be proud of at this university. It's not only critical to the University of Iowa, it's important to the state, the nation, and the world. And as a lot of you in this room know, students flock to this country and to this university for our programs. And that's an important statement that we should all take very seriously, and we should stay on top of that as we move forward. But things are changing for graduate education. Dean Keller is a leader in this field and will share with us some of his views that he picks up in his various groups through AAU and other graduate college deans' interactions. There's a lot of internal competition for students, changes in graduate enrollment, developments in the job market in terms of degree expectations, and many other pressures on graduate education around the country. So Dean Keller is on top of this, and he's going to share with us tonight some of what he knows and his view for where we should be moving to into the future. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce then Dean John Keller. He served as Associate Provost for Graduate Education and Dean of the Graduate College since 2000. So he's been at it for 14 or 15 years now. First as interim for a couple of years and then stepping into the permanent position in 2002. In his time in these positions, he's provided oversight for the development of several new programs that we now enjoy, helped to establish new and expanded graduate fellowship programs, and establish the Office of Graduate Inclusion to coordinate diversity efforts at graduate level. He is a strong representative for the University of Iowa on the national level and has served in leadership positions for the AAU, the Association of Graduate Schools, and the Council of Graduate Schools. And he's also served as chair of the CIC Graduate Deans Group. That's the Big Ten plus the University of Chicago. I think everybody knows that. But it's a very powerful group, and to have the chair of that group from the University of Iowa is very important. John is also a professor of dental research and oral and maxillofacial surgery in the College of Dentistry, and he's a highly accomplished scholar, as evidenced, just for one example, by his election as a Fellow of the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences. So with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Dean John Keller to the podium here. And John, would you please come up? Let's join me in welcoming him.
Well, thank you, Alyssa and Barry, for that wonderful introduction and to tonight's activities. I'm absolutely delighted at the attendance here tonight. It's really very flattering, very heartwarming that so many people from so many different disciplines and walks of life, both students, faculty, staff, administrators, members of the public that are here today to listen to some remarks and some reflections that I have about my experiences in graduate education. Now, many of you know me, but you don't really know my background very well. Barry talked a little bit about that, but let me give you a little bit more detail. After graduating with a degree in biological sciences from the University of Illinois, quite some time ago now, I joined the graduate program in biomaterial science at Northwestern University, and that's really where my experience and my reflections on graduate education started. When I graduated from there, I took my first faculty job at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And as Alyssa mentioned and Barry mentioned, I came to the University of Iowa in 1988. My faculty position is in the College of Dentistry. I'm not a clinician, but it's very interesting to be a graduate dean, being a full tenured professor in a department of oral and maxillofacial surgery, when everybody else has history or chemistry or what have you. It's very interesting, makes for great cocktail party conversation. So what I would like to do tonight is to share with you some of the reflections that I have about graduate education and my experiences. I'll try to bring in a couple of stories that I have from my own graduate career and my career as a young faculty member, struggling with being a graduate faculty member and getting my own research started, because I think they're important sort of things that I've remembered through my career that I recall almost every day in my job as the graduate dean. So I want to thank the campus partners that helped put this on and helped sponsor this. The Graduate Student Senate, of course, the Graduate and Professional Student Government, the Office of Vice President for Research and Economic Development, which is a key campus partner for the Graduate College. It always has been. We evolved out of the Vice President for Research's office back in the late 80s. We continue to have good relationships with them, and we probably wouldn't do as good of a job as we are doing now if we did not have that relationship. I'd also like to thank the Faculty Senate and the Faculty Senate officers for their support in this endeavor as well, and also the Graduate Council, which is our main advisory body to the Graduate College. And a number of you who are on that council are present here tonight, and I'm very grateful for your participation. So why does graduate education matter? Well, Barry alluded to this to a certain degree, and the fact that the University of Iowa is privileged to be one of the 64 AAU institutions in this country. American Association of Universities. What does that mean? It means that we are a research-intensive institution that has an inextricable link of strong graduate educational programs and very high-quality research that's conducted at the university. It's a privilege to be amongst this group of 64. We've been a member of this group since 1909, over 100 years. The organization started in 1900, so we've been a member of this organization for the entire existence of the AAU. Membership in this organization is by invitation only. It's a president's organization. They invite different institutions to participate and to come into the AAU at certain times, under certain circumstances. And quite frankly, over time, some institutions have been voted out of the AAU. So our status as an AAU institution is something we can't take lightly, and we should continue to strive to maintain our stature in that particular organization. So why else does graduate education matter? Well, when I think of graduate education programs and how we provide an influence to what we do throughout the world, we impact the state of Iowa. A couple of examples are as follows. So I think of the graduate students that are working in the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities and in the various programs across campus in engineering, public health, liberal arts and science that are working to revitalize the cities and the communities in our state. I can think of the work that's being done in Muscatine, in Dubuque, in Cedar Rapids, here in Iowa City now, extending out to the further western regions of our state out in Sioux City. I think of some of the students that are working on key elements of why we can understand and how we can understand our culture in Iowa. We have a covenant with the land here in this state, and that heritage with the land is important for us to understand and to remember as we move into the future. Graduate education from Iowa impacts the nation. We have a national driving simulator as one example that's out at the Oakdale campus. The graduate students and the scholars that work out at the simulator help us figure out different technologies to make the vehicles we drive better, and they work on behavioral and personality type of issues that help make us better drivers. And of course, our College of Education, as one example, has preeminent status in high quality education throughout the state and throughout the nation. There's likely no county in the state of Iowa that is not impacted by educators and administrators who have been trained and educated at the University of Iowa. We impact the world with our graduate education programs as well. And I would hazard to guess that the scientific discoveries, the translational and clinical research that is done on our health science campus in the colleges of medicine, dentistry, public health, pharmacy, nursing, have led to the fact that we are a regional center for the treatment of Ebola should it arise in this state. We are also the graduate students and scholars working in the various writing programs and elsewhere on campus have helped Iowa City become established as one of the UNESCO cities of literature. There are only 7 of these in the entire world. Iowa City happens to be one because of the strength of our graduate students and the scholars that work in these programs. So what I would argue with you that graduate education has never mattered more than it does now as we look to the future and how we can improve and how we can meet the challenges of our society and the needs of our stakeholders. I don't know how to best illustrate this in words better than a recent report from the Council of Graduate Schools. This report happened to come out when I was a member of the board of CGS. It's called A Path Forward. It's readily available. And it basically states that we're going to need innovative solutions to the challenges we have in the 21st century, which is our century. And this is going to depend upon having a very highly skilled workforce to do so. And I would like to think, and I would contend that at least part of that highly skilled workforce are going to be the graduate students that move into the future to address these particular situations. Now let's take a step back, and how do we get to the point where we're able to do this? So when we think back on the left-hand side of the slide to when we were the beginning of an AAU institution back in the early 1900s, we had some professional programs, medicine, law, dentistry. Pharmacy happens to be a little more recent, but I've added there for completion's sake. We had PhD programs, and we had Masters of Arts and Master of Science programs, the academic degrees in graduate education. As time went on, we innovated to the fact that, as Dan Reed pointed out in his talk about research a few months ago, we're the ones that created the MFA programs and the DMA programs, the creative degrees in graduate education. As time further went on, we started bringing on new programs that had professional orientation, Master of Social Work, Master of Arts in Teaching, Master of Science in Nursing, and the like. And we also, quite frankly, were leaders in the development of clinical doctorate degree programs, the Doctor of Nursing Practice, Doctor of Physical Therapy, and Doctor of Audiology, that emanated and evolved out of their existing academic programs in those particular disciplines. One of the strengths on this campus is the fact that we are now merging degrees. Our students are working on joint degrees in a wide variety of fashions. And the best example I can think of is the long-standing medical scientist training program that allows students to pursue a combined medical degree as well as the PhD. There are now many, many other types of degrees that are coming up, combinations of degrees. Alyssa Billmeyer is a perfect example of that, pursuing the pharmacy degree as well as the MHA degree concurrently. I can't wait to see what she's going to be doing with those degree combinations in the future. The best example I can think of that's happened recently, who's graduated, is this fellow right here, Elliot Shearer. Some of you in the room may know Elliot. Elliot graduated with his MD and his PhD last May 2014. And in his research with Richard Smith and others on campus, he helped to develop a genetic test that identifies the 70 known genes that impact deafness. Now, could you imagine being the parent of a young infant or a young child who cannot hear and having a readily available, readily cheap technique and test to help diagnose what might be wrong with your child? This is the type of work that our graduate students are doing. Elliot's a prime example of that. He's currently continuing his medical work in the Department of Otolaryngology as a first-year resident. So, in thinking about how we can move forward to meet the needs of the workforce, various career opportunities, how we can strengthen the opportunities and the success of our students, I'd like to think about three different aspects that are on my mind right now. And this talk is divided into three different categories. One is landscape issues that are impacting us right now. Some of these are real. We need to know about them, and we need to take them on head on. Innovations that are involved in graduate education. I alluded to some of the strengths that we've had. We're capable of doing this on this campus. We've done it in the past. We can do it in the future. And finally, I'd like to challenge this particular room and your colleagues from the staff, students, faculty, administrators, and the public for a call to action on what we must do now to continue to improve ourselves so that we can meet the needs, interests, and expectations of our stakeholders that support us, as well as maintain our status as an AAU institution. So, I can't think of a better way to illustrate my thoughts on this subject than some of the words of the preeminent scholar of our time, Dr. Emmett Brown.
We're sending you back to the future.
So some of you are probably familiar with the Back to the Future trilogy. Doc Brown happens to be one of my favorites out of that trilogy, and the reason that he's one of my favorites is that he's a very optimistic individual. And he sends his good friend Marty McFly to the future so that Marty can figure out his destiny in life. And Marty lands in the town square that he lives in the year 2015. Happens to be this year. And my favorite part of the second part of that trilogy is the big video screen in the back of the town square, and the news clips that are going by that says, Cubs win the World Series in 2015. So I'm looking forward to that event happening this year. New management, a lot of new young players, new pitching staff. I'm ready to go. Now, despite Doc's optimism and my own optimism and faith in how we can move forward with graduate education, we do have pressures that we are encountering right now, and these are real. And I'm not talking about Deflategate in the NFL. Let's take a look at some of the perspectives from the national scene. One is the economy. So we've come out of a recession, according to most economists, but the impacts of the recession are still being felt across our country, and the pressures on our national budgets are immense. The priorities at the current time, as I've come to learn them from different plenary speakers that I've listened to at different graduate deans meetings that I've gone to, are national security and protecting our entitlement programs, such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and health care now. So that things that are near and dear to our hearts, like education, higher education, and research, while they're still priorities, they're kind of off to the side. And for probably the next 6 to 8 years at the national level, we're going to be very lucky if those budgets for those particular aspects remain relatively neutral and stable. There may be some new initiatives coming out of some organizations and some agencies, but they're going to be at the expense of another organization due to reallocations to meet one need to another. Employment issues are real as well. I think it's now folly for us to think that our doctoral students in particular, are going to assume faculty positions when they leave our institution. In fact, for the last number of years, only about 20% of our doctoral graduates are able to take tenure-track jobs immediately after their graduate school career. They also tend not to be at positions that are at Research One institutions like ours. They tend to be at four-year liberal arts colleges or other types of academic institutions. The majority of our students that graduate with doctoral degrees that remain in academics remain in some sort of postgraduate training program, postdoctoral positions on the science side, or on the humanities and social science side, largely transient type of teaching positions at different kinds of institutions before, presumably, they can land a tenure-track job at a Research One school or one of their choice. These are real issues. This employment issue is now real, and we need to begin to think about other options for our graduates that they can pursue to have successful careers, other than academic positions like our own. We have pressures on the local scene as well. One of those is funding. Funding is a real issue. I've been here, as was reported, about 25 years. And I think it's fair to say there's only been a couple of years when we haven't had increased state appropriations from the legislature. They're typically very modest increases, but they've been increases nonetheless that contribute to our general education fund. So we have to think about how that's going to occur in the future and what that really means. Now, with that, of course, is the fact that we get these modest increases, but there are many priorities for the institution's budgets, and that often reflects on having to have reallocations from organizations like the colleges and other administrative units back to the center in order to meet these key priorities that the institution has. Another thing about the funding is now we're worried about the performance-based funding model that's been recommended by the regents to the legislature. That's still in debate. We don't know the outcome of that yet. We won't for some time probably. And tied in with that, what's going on at the university, and I don't have to tell all you guys about, is the fact that we've had this huge efficiency report from Deloitte, which has now been transformed and evolved into the tier effort. So we really don't know the outcomes yet on our campus for our instructional technology side, our human resource units, and our budgeting units. These will have impacts as well. And we're anticipating some changes in the graduate college, quite frankly, along these lines as well. Enrollments. Provost Butler alluded to the fact that our professional college enrollments are relatively stable for the most part. There's some fluctuation now in the College of Law with some enrollment issues there, but by and large, they're very stable. Not so at the undergraduate level. We're seeing increases in undergraduate students, likely to see many more in the near future. Don't know how many, but more are expected to be here. We're making an effort to recruit more students to come. On the graduate side, however, Provost Butler alluded to the fact that we have some issues here. We have some challenges. Across the graduate college, graduate enrollment's down about 10% in the last 5 years. Some variation depending upon degree programs, but overall down about 10%. This has come to now impact our financial aid budget, which has been decreased because of other pressures for those resources elsewhere. But that's a challenge we're looking at and trying to figure out how to address. We're going to have new leaders on campus in a lot of key areas. We don't know who they're going to be, what their initiatives are going to be, but it's something we are looking forward to in the next year. And at the same time, overlaid with that, is we are the beginning thinking process, which is probably a little bit on hold now, but we'll come back to be a strong point on our campus, is we're going to have the development of a new strategic plan. All these issues are happening sort of simultaneously and are going to have an impact on the campus. So while there are a lot of challenges and pressures that are being placed on us, some not under our control, some under our control, we have the ability to reflect on what this means for us. And again, a very good colleague on campus gave a talk a little bit ago, and these words, I think, ring very true to this particular venue as well, that the rate of change is challenging historical traditions and values, which is daunting. It is daunting. Lots happening at the same time. Now, how do we work our way out of this? How do we address the future? Dan gave us some hope, however, though, that the survivors of this will control our own destiny. So while there are challenges, there are also huge opportunities for us to move forward and to make adjustments in what we do and how we do it. And it's up to us to figure out collectively how that might happen. So when I think of these very difficult challenges that I face in my world, I sometimes step back to the beginning. If you don't know where to start, you go back to the beginning. And that's always been a very true mantra for me and worked very well for me. So I'll reflect on some of these things. How are we to prepare our students for the future so that they can be successful in their future endeavors? How do we support the faculty to move forward so they can innovate in their own research and scholarship and help their own students to be successful? And finally, how do we re-envision our programs to meet the challenges and needs of our stakeholders and the expectations that our stakeholders have on us, as well as maintain this status as a premier AAU institution? They're heady challenges, no argument there, but we have the ability to move forward because we can control our own destiny. So, there's another quote that I like to think about too, related to this, is from Einstein. This is when Einstein won his Nobel Prize. He was a younger man then than most pictures we tend to think about him. But he basically said, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. This particular quote from a person much smarter than I makes me reflect back on my own graduate career. So the same sort of process happened. Let me try to explain this. So when I was a beginning graduate student, I had a professor named Edward Kaminsky. And Dr. Kaminsky's sort of mantra was, if you're not understanding what's going on, you're not working hard enough. So I was working on a project that had to determine the concentration of various metals in biological solution using a technique called atomic absorption spectrophotometry. And for the life of me, when I ran these experiments, I couldn't make heads or tails out of the results. It made no sense to me whatsoever. I implored Dr. Kaminsky to try to help me understand what was going wrong and to make some sense out of this. And he sort of would wink and nod and, okay, well, you need to figure this out. My estimation was he wasn't really helping me. So one day, he's getting prepared to go off on a long 4th of July weekend. It was the summer of 1980. It was very hot in the summer of 1980 in Chicago. And he was walking down the hall and pushed the elevator door. Door opens up. I was really imploring him. I was just completely exasperated with his lack of, my impression of his lack of helping me. The door opened up and he turned, pushed the button to go down, and said, John, you're forgetting one thing about this whole process. And I said, what's that? And he goes, this is your dissertation, not mine. The door closed. He went down to a wonderful 5-day 4th of July weekend. I stomped back to the lab, trying to figure out what to do. I ran the experiment yet again. Results were basically the same. I couldn't figure them out. So the next day, when I woke up and got rid of my hangover from the frustration of all this, I sat back and said, well, maybe I need to rethink what's going on. I need to step back for this whole process, redo the whole thing, basically, in my mind. So I went down to the lab, set up the experiment again, and very quickly realized that I had run all of the controls for the dilution concentrations wrong. Made that correction, reran the experiment. Everything worked in a very understandable way. He comes back from his couple-day trip. A couple of days later, I was so excited to see him. I could explain what was going on. He said, oh, I thought you might have some rationale for what was going on. Let's get a cup of coffee and talk about it. So we did. And he said to me, I had an inkling that you set up the experiment wrong and something was going wrong with the experiment, but I couldn't tell you that because if I had told you that, you never would have learned anything. It was something you had to step back from and try to rethink out the process of what you were undertaking and how the experiment was set up. I've never forgotten that day in my career. 35 years later, almost 36 years later, I've never forgotten that. We have to sometimes step outside the box, rethink what we're doing in order to make advancements in the work that we do. So, when we think of innovations that are going on in graduate education at the university, I know we can do these things. We've done it before. We can continue to do it. We set up the creative degrees, the MFA, the DMA. We're the ones that helped evolve the clinical doctorates from their academic programs into now the clinical doctorates. We've created a bunch of new, very high valuable programs in professional areas for our master's programs. We have very high level accomplishments by our graduate students. How many in the room know that since the existence of the Council of Graduate Schools National Dissertation Prize competition in 1985, the University of Iowa has 5 National Dissertation Prize winners and 12 finalists. We have more than any other public institution in the country. We're only outdone by Yale, and that was just this past year. We also have a record of strong competition at our regional level with our master's thesis awards, including 2 last year in both categories. We can do this work. Our students can do this work. We're some of the earlier starters up in interdisciplinary programs, and some of our interdisciplinary programs have been in existence for 20, 30, a couple of cases almost 40 years now. They're strong. They bring together collective people across campus to work on particular problems. I believe we can do more. And evidence of that is the new initiatives in the last 4 or 5 years that the university has undertaken in trying to form teams of faculty to work together on interdisciplinary problems, the cluster hire approach that we've taken. Examples of these are aging, obesity, water sustainability, and even excitingly, the digital humanities areas in the humanities. Even more so now, we're looking towards how we can make our students our work more transparent to the public. So work and public engagement for organizations like the Obermann Center and its fellowship program for public engagement that it takes place in the J-term period. And other work, perhaps, for example, in the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities and other places on campus are extremely powerful techniques to help broaden the perspective of the work that our students and our scholars undertake. Now, this is a rather busy slide, and it's the only one that I'll show you that has a lot of data on it, but I want to reflect on some key things because I can't ask, as a graduate dean, the campus to participate in innovation and thinking about things differently if the graduate college is not prepared to do so itself. So one of the things, if you look back in the year 2003, you'll notice the blue line are the number of new PhD students that entered into our graduate programs in that year. And the red line is the number of students who were granted PhDs. There's a disconnect. This was an unsustainable model at that time. We're bringing many more students than we were graduating, and while it's not illustrated on this particular slide, the overall percent completion of our 70-some doctoral programs hovered around 50%. So we brought in 10, 5 would graduate, 5 wouldn't. That's an unsustainable model. What is a sustainable model is to see where the 2 lines become closer together. And in a perfect world, which we know we're not going to have, those 2 numbers would be equivalent. We bring in the same number of students each year for the following year that we graduated in the previous year. We know that's not going to happen. But you can see a crossover point in about the year 2010, 2011, where we started graduating more students than we were admitting. A lot of issues there about why that's happening. But there was a backlog of students that were trying to complete their degrees. And they've been successful. And you can see within a 10-year period, we're graduating about 100 more doctoral students than we were 10 years ago. Now, how did this happen? And I should say that the completion rate has advanced over this 10-year period from hovering around 50 to a couple percent over 60. Still not where we want it to be, but improvement nonetheless. Several things have happened in terms of how this occurred that we'd like to think that graduate college had a key role in, and the university had a key role in, quite honestly. One is that we revisited a lot of our policies and procedures to make them more student-centric, more student-friendly, even if they were difficult to enact. So one of the key things we did was to initiate a continuous registration policy after our students reached post-comprehensive status. One of the other things the university decided to do was to begin to use its resources much more strategically than it had in the past. We started our process along the tuition scholarship that we now enjoy. And as we move along in years, one of the other key things we've done further along the way in terms of strategic use of resources came out of the graduate college. It was extremely painful was the phasing out of the block allocation program, which we used to start the Strategic Initiative Fund program, which now there are a number of best practices that have emanated out of programs that have had these awards, as well as an expanded and enhanced and more robust fellowship program for our students. The strategic use of resources on the campus has continued in that we now have a full tuition scholarship available for our graduate students, which is a key factor on being able to support our students. And you may recall when Provost Lowe was here, in the beginning of the current strategic plan, he appointed a graduate education task force to review all the graduate programs on our campus and have that program that committee make recommendations to the campus about future improvements that could be made. Some of the key things that came out of that task force were a number of program actions, totaling right now about 80 in 5 years, that have been from restructuring and renaming existing programs to make them more current, more relevant for the discipline and for our students, as well as the elimination of some sub-programs or underneath a degree program, renaming some, bringing on new sub-programs that make them more relevant, more effective for the types of faculty and the expertise we have now, to some overt termination of graduate programs which were no longer sustainable, to the beginning of many new graduate programs, quite frankly. We've had a number of new programs be approved in the last 5 years. So considerable success is being made in a number of different fronts. I don't think we're quite done with this yet. The task force still recommended a number of different things that we can continue to work on. And we need to leverage this task force work as we look forward. One is in the larger picture of student success initiatives. And by this I mean I'll challenge everyone in the room to go back to their program to think about how we can revisit our programs from the start, from when we recruit and admit students to when they complete their degrees and they complete and move on to successful careers. I think we need to take a revisit in our recruitment and admissions process so that we're looking at students that are good matches to our graduate programs and our programs are good matches to them. We want to create intellectual synergy so that our students have a legitimate chance to complete the degree if the program understands they have the academic and the background, the aptitude to complete the degree. They have the potential to complete. What does this mean in some other terms? I think the days where we bring in numbers of graduate students to keep our size at current levels or to make them robust, because we need teaching expertise, we need research expertise, we need to phase out. We need to be student-centric and have the students' interests and potential in mind. We also need to think of curricular changes that need to take place in our programs, and we need to think where intellectual synergies exist that can strengthen our programs, particularly in light of interdisciplinary activities going on campus. The task force made some pretty strong recommendations in this area, some of them being worked on right now, particularly in the biomedical life science programs, and we hope that there will be a new proposal about this restructuring coming out shortly that we can look at and evaluate. But I think there are also opportunities in this regard in our social sciences and in our humanities on campus as well. The third point, that the task force recommended that I want to emphasize that we still need to leverage is to try to emphasize the success of a diverse student body, whatever our definition of diversity is. We want to work collectively on campus to supplement what we do in various units, to fill in gaps of what needs to be done, to make our underrepresented students in graduate education as successful as we can possibly make them be. So, once again, I can't ask the campus as a graduate dean to undertake this sort of initiative if the graduate college isn't prepared to do its own work. If we're going to talk the talk, the graduate college also needs to walk the walk. We're very cognizant of national trends that are going on in different areas, and we have evidence from the campus that there are certain needs for change. Status quo is no longer acceptable in the graduate college in terms of what we're trying to do. We're not standing still anymore in the grad college. We're looking at exit surveys from our students to see what kind of touch points, what kind of things that they need to improve their likelihood of completing the degree, make their world a little more straightforward, a little more efficient, a little more effective while they're in their graduate programs. We're now beginning to look at surveying students in their post-comp status, so somewhere in the middle of their career, as well as we will be undertaking very shortly a survey of beginning students after their first year in order to get a feel for how their experience has been very early in their career, so we can make some adjustments along the way if we need to. You will note, if you haven't already, that the Graduate College is moving from a processing organization to a student success service type of organization. We want to help students. We want to do this in a collaborative way with other organizations that are working very hard on campus to accomplish the same goal, but we're also trying to fill in gaps where we see that they exist. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. Over the last decade or so, we've worked very hard to revise policies and procedures to make our graduate educational programs more effective. We have worked extremely hard on the thesis deposit process. And I'm proud to say that this past exit survey for our fall graduates, we did not have one negative comment about the thesis deposit process, not one. We've streamlined the requirements for submission. We've made the whole process electronic, which has now used technology to, as efficiently as possible, to make this process work for our students. We've started up a grad success office. The little symbol is over there on the left. Our organization has worked very, very hard with thinking about our students in the future and what they need to be doing to be successful. We've teamed up with the Graduate Student Senate at the Jacobson Conference last year to have a pre-conference conference on careers outside the academy. It was oversubscribed. The number of people that wanted to be there, we couldn't get them in the room. Huge, huge interest and needs in this area. We're partnering again this year at the Jacobson Conference at the end of March with the same kind of event. And if I recall correctly, it's extremely well subscribed at this point as well. We're looking at how we can make the work of our students much more transparent to the public. Again, trying to meet the needs and interests and expectations, quite frankly, of our stakeholders. We've initiated a public abstract process now for our students that they have to be able to explain their work for those who are depositing theses or dissertations in layperson's terms so that a layperson could look at their work and understand what's going on, rather than just a technical abstract that's been typically part of the process for many, many years. Tied in with this is now the new competition, the 3-minute thesis competition, that allows students to understand and be able to articulate their work in a very short period of time. This competition, we're pairing up again with the Graduate Student Senate. It will take place actually in this room in the middle of April in the various disciplines, with a final competition on a Saturday night in April. We're looking forward to that. We're also working very, very hard with a number of units on campus for this transition from undergrad to graduate. You'll see more about this taking place on campus in more units where there's logical connection of our undergraduate programs with some of the undergraduate programs with some of our graduate programs, where there's a good connection on immediately getting students jump-started into graduate work while they're still here on campus, rather than having to come back, thus saving them time, saving them some resources, and making them stronger candidates for employment in whatever careers they decide to move forward in. We can't do this work now or in the future without campus partnering. I've talked a little bit already about the campus partnership with the Vice President for Research, and it goes without saying that they're key partners with us in this movement forward. We're also working very hard with the Center for Teaching, with the Writing Center, with the library. I have to applaud John Colshaw, the head of our libraries here, that he has maintained the position that we need a graduate study space in the library. 3rd floor, make sure you're using it. We don't want to lose it. John's got space needs. The Obermann Center, again, for public engagement, interdisciplinary work, has been a very effective partner for us in graduate education. The Graduate College has had a long-standing relationship and level of support to ArtShare. This is a program where art students in the theater arts, dance, music, go out to the public and perform their work in various types of venues in organizations. We couldn't do this work again without the help of ITS, our information technology, and our work with the registrar and the new Maui system, which is a very powerful tool for us to be able to bring efficiencies into our processing effort. Hence, we can take a little less time doing that work and put more time and effort into our student success. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about some of the partnerships that our own units in the graduate college have had to strengthen their positioning with our writing programs, again, in the UNESCO City of Literature, with our library science program and its outreach to place-bound individuals needing graduate education in their particular field, with the teacher librarian program to help train public librarians out in the workforce that can't leave their homes to come here for a face-to-face program. I'd also like to credit our students and our faculty in the School of Urban and Regional Planning in their interrelationship along with other students and faculty and other programs, again, with the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities. So, I told Barry that I was going to reflect on some of the comments that he's had too about this work. This is a very collaborative approach. We have to work on these things together. We're beginning to do that in a much more intense way than we probably have in the past. These partnerships are critical. We have to work together, and all of you have probably heard that one acronym, TEAM. Together, everyone achieves more. If we're willing to put away our egos and determine what's best for our students and for our programs, we're likely to be able to make much more effective use of our resource and our time and our effort. So, I have a call for action for you. I'm going to challenge each of you here as students, as staff, as faculty, members of the public, to think about what we're doing well. What's your envision for the future? How can we improve? And what do you propose that we do in order to make these improvements? So this is a call to action, but I think there's already a framework for us to move forward in this direction, and that is the tenets of the current strategic plan. I don't know that they're going to vary an awful lot in the next one. There might be some variations in themes and directions and data points as to what success means and this type of thing, but the overall themes are there. We want our students to be successful. We want them to leave here and pursue legitimate careers that they're good at doing, that they'll feel like they are making an impact in the world. So we need to expand the career opportunities for our students beyond the academic scope that we've focused on for so many years. In order to do that, we need to figure out better ways to help them prepare for these careers. And I'm not talking about the last semester that they're here. I'm talking about the day that they walk in the door, and even before they're being recruited here. We need to have truth in advertising as to what types of careers one can potentially obtain with the types of degrees that our students are pursuing. It starts with day one. And of course, in order to be able to do this, we need to be rethinking our curriculum, innovate our curriculum to meet the needs of the future. Intellectual synergies are key in my mind, and we need to continue to work on campus to use our resources strategically as possible. Now, if we're able to accomplish that in that inner circle, using the tenets of the strategic plan, these basic principles, it's my firm belief that we will have more successful students, and the more successful students that we will have more distinctive programs. So each of you as a faculty member, think about what's distinctive about my program right now. What separates me out from the equivalent program at another institution? Why would I want a student to come here compared to another school? What would make it attractive for a faculty member to be recruited here? What is distinctive about our programs? And if we create more distinctive programs locally, it's my firm belief that we will create more programs of distinction like the ones that Barry mentioned in his earlier remarks. We have a number of them on campus that are nationally and internationally known. We should strive to have more of those. Make this campus as the best it could possibly be. While we're doing all this, of course, we need to meet the needs and interests and expectations, quite frankly, of our stakeholders, ranging from the taxpayers to the legislatures, our regents, our students, the disciplines we work in. They all have expectations of us. We need to start thinking about those goals and what their interests are in the work that we do as well. And if we do that, I believe that we can also work on maintaining our status as an AAU Research One institution. That's critical for us to maintain. So, I'll leave you with a couple of key questions. Again, there's members of the public here. There's members of our staff, students, faculty, administrators. I'll ask you two questions. What are you prepared to do to help your students be more successful? And what are you prepared to do to make your programs more distinctive? Now, I know a couple of other individuals could ask you the same question. This would be Federal Agent Jim Malone and Federal Marshal Elliot Ness.
You see what I'm saying? What are you prepared to do?
What are you prepared to do? Make our students successful, make our programs distinctive. Thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate your attendance on such a weather night as we've had today and this afternoon and this evening. So thank you very much for being here. I believe there's time for questions. Are there any questions from anyone? Or are you all tired and hungry and in need of something to drink? I'm sorry, Chris.
So you mentioned concerns about funding, state level funding in particular, and just yesterday in the legislature there was a raging debate about graduate education, professional education, the costs of educating graduate and professional students, and whether or not the state has a responsibility to help subsidize those costs. I wonder if you would speak a little bit to that debate and what role the graduate college and the university can and will play in articulating a vision to the state legislators for the value of graduate and professional education.
Okay, so you're asking a couple of different things, and I'll reflect back that this will be a challenge to articulate it to some of our stakeholders at least. As you know, in the current performance-based funding model, graduate and professional education and research is only 5% of that budget, which is unfortunate because that's some of the things we're really good at doing, okay, as are at least one of our peers. This is a challenge. Barry and I were discussing this just the other day, and years ago it used to be that society had to educate students through the 8th grade. That was their responsibility. Now it's through the 12th grade. The question now becomes, how far along does this process work? There are a lot of bouncing ideas off of there, a lot of key issues. If I think for the last number of at least presidential perspectives, of presidents of the country perspectives, a more higher educated populace is a better thing. So that there are some needs and interests to help students when they're undergraduates. A key issue has been what happens at the graduate and the professional level. I can articulate several examples from personal situations as well as from what I've observed over time. I think we have an obligation to help support students as much as we can. That might come from different perspectives. It might not come as much from state resources or the public. It might come from private donation type of activity, and the university is starting to move in that direction more than it has in the past in terms of private fundraising for graduate professional educations. It's moving in that direction. But resources are tight. It's a hard sell. You talk to a typical person out in the public in the state of Iowa, and why would we want to support a student through 4 years of medical school and 4 years of otolaryngological training like Elliot? Well, the answer being is you want some of those people to stay back in the state to help take care of your families and the communities and that type of thing. So there is this dual relationship that is not often well understood by the public. And these are some of the things that I'm trying to point out. And quite frankly, I'm not sure we've done as educators, not just here, but nationally, academics, we haven't done a very good job of that, quite frankly, over the years. It's been sort of an aloof situation. And I'm being honest in my observations. We need to do a better job of that. So things like ArtShare, things like the IISC, things like other types of activities we're working on, are key elements to try to get the message out that we're doing good things. We do care about what's going on in our communities. Let's face it, pick a small town in Iowa. They all want a doctor, they want a dentist, they want a lawyer in town. Where are they going to get those folks? From places like the University of Iowa. What's going to drive them back? There's some help with loan debt and that kind of thing. So there is this dual relationship, which quite frankly, I don't know that we've articulated that very well. We need to do a better job. It's a challenge. David.
John, great talk. To follow on Kristen's question and maybe flip this a little bit to say that 80% or something like that of Iowa's undergraduate students are here because they aspire to a graduate professional school. As I understand it, many of these people can even name the graduate or professional school they're coming to.
Correct.
And the point is, these kids are voting with their feet. They're here because they want to get into graduate school. And where would we be if we didn't have the graduate programs for the kids from Iowa and the kids from around the world who wanted to come here for undergraduate experience? And I wonder if we can flip that story and maybe help on how we can tell that story.
Right. These are tough challenges, but it's a story we've got to do a better job at telling, and do it in a cordial way that the communities and the folks out in the communities can better understand. David.
A couple of related questions. You mentioned that enrollments are down. Are application numbers down also?
Yes, they are, at least at the University of Iowa. Now recall, you get a little worried about that, concerned about it, but remember, there's over 750 institutions, at least in the Council of Graduate Schools, that offer graduate educational programs. We're not the only kid in the block that's offering these things. Students have many options, particularly when it comes to professional-oriented programs, at the graduate level. Many challenges there, many challenges. How do we meet the needs and interests of people that are in the workforce with a legitimate, very high-quality graduate program when that employer, for that individual, may not need the imprimatur of a Research One institution for that degree? I'll give you a personal example. My daughter's an 8th grade science teacher at Cedar Rapids Prairie District. She graduated with her undergraduate degree in education. She said, Dad, I really immediately want, for job advancement, career salaries, that type of thing, I want to immediately walk into a graduate program. Iowa's known for its graduate programs in education. What should I do? She looked into some of the programs that she was interested in pursuing. Quite frankly, they would be a challenge for her. They were courses after her work hours. Couldn't get to all those, it was like, I can't be doing this for 4 or 5, 6 years to be able to take a course, cherry pick a course here and there to do that. I need something a little more structured that I can get at. I've got 100 students I see every day. I've got papers to grade, lesson plans to make, other things to do too. She chose to take an online program through UNI. It's a program that she graduated from at the undergraduate level. She knew the system, she knows the faculty. It worked for her. And quite frankly, her employer, the college community district, doesn't really care where the degree is from. It's just that she's got the degree. And that's just one example I can think of. So the other thing that concerns me a little bit, it's starting to change now on our campus, is that I wonder whether our opportunity for some of the critically needed advanced professional master's degree programs, we've lost an opportunity because there are so many other programs that are already doing it. We haven't thought about these things for good reason. We're a Research One school. We haven't thought about these kind of opportunities. We're starting to change that now. And you can see now with our new business analytics degree as one example I can think of immediately that we're moving in this direction. Highly competitive area. So we're beginning to think of these innovative changes that we can make to offer different opportunities for different types of students that'll make us a much more powerful and effective institution. And begin to spread some of the word that I think Dean Johnson was talking about. Other thoughts? Yes?
I have a question about focusing on time to degree. So one concern with usually funneling students through is that they might not be here long enough to really develop the skills necessary for a workforce, whether in academia or not academia. Have you thought about focusing on other measures like publications or patents or
right.
measures of grad?
Right. These are all things that we are interested in. So I'm assuming that there will be a new strategic plan in the future, and I'm assuming that there will be a charge from the provost's office at that time to revisit some of these parameters that we've used to analyze success of a program and of a student. These are the types of things we'll be looking at. Arguably, time to degree, quite frankly, was probably an issue that was more of concern to us in the graduate college a decade ago than it is now. So I didn't go through all that data in great detail, but one thing that was up there is that a decade ago, the median time to degree for our over 70-some programs was about 6 years. But buried in that message was that there were a lot of programs where the median time to degree was over 7 years. That's no longer true. In fact, if you go over a decade again, you'll notice that the median time to degree is now 5.7 or that kind of thing. About a third of a year in graduate education is a lot over 70-some programs. Huge changes there. And what's even more buried in that information is that I think there's only 4 programs now that have a median time to degree over 7. So what we're trying to articulate out of the graduate college is, yeah, we're concerned about time to degree. We don't want students being here any longer than they need to be, but we want them to be prepared to leave to move into the types of careers that they want to pursue. So we're looking at what's the length of time that's efficient for that particular discipline and for that particular program. Okay, that's what we're looking for, is efficiency. Shorter is not necessarily better. Might be in some cases, but not all. I mean, there can only be a finite amount of time, right? I mean, it's like running the 100-yard dash. You can only run it so fast, right? Won't be able to get much faster than what we're doing now. So time to degree is important, but not as important as it once was. What we're focusing on now is the completion of our students in the degree programs that they're in. We want to see that improved on campus. And how do we do that? We think it's with some of the points that we mentioned today. Curricular innovations, funding models for our students. What's the right type of funding at the right time of their career? We know of so many programs, for example, in the sciences, where the only main source of support is research assistantships, when those students might want to move out into a teaching career as well. They haven't had much of a chance to get that experience. On the other side of campus, in some of the social sciences, and clearly in the humanities, there's mostly teaching assistantships to support students. There's not a lot of fellowships or research assistantship opportunity. Those students need time too to work on their own scholarship. So we have to think about funding models for students as well as we're looking towards how do we help them prepare for careers beyond their graduate career. A lot of cosmic tumblers hitting all at the same time of things we're trying to accomplish. But we have the ability to do that. We're innovative people. We've done this in the past. I think we can continue to do this in the future. It's my firm belief that we can do this. It takes time, but we can do this. Other questions? Thoughts? Yes, I'm sorry.
I think your comments and suggestions sound great, and it sounds like we need to get in a different skill set of people and professors to do some of this stuff. And the operation manual the university set up in the traditional hierarchical structure, is that going to have to change at the same time to make this happen?
Maybe. 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 We have a very traditional view of what faculty roles are here, what they need to be doing. And again, I'm only speaking, I can't speak to that in its entirety. But what I can speak to is that we need to figure out what makes our programs distinctive. Why would you want to recruit a student or a new faculty member to a particular program that you're in versus them being interested in another program? Why is that distinctive? It could be, for example, in the Department of Mathematics. Those folks are really well known for preparing students to go off to take academic careers in four-year liberal arts schools. They're very distinctive. They're known for that. They've won awards for that, for doing that with underrepresented students. That's a distinction that they have, for example. Other programs that we have are distinctive in other ways. High quality research, number of T32 National Training Grant awardees, number of national competitions that students have won, fellowships, that type of thing. Those are distinctions that you can articulate to a student or to a faculty member when you're recruiting them here. Those are the types of things I'm thinking about. Whether that means a revisit of our faculty roles, I think it does to a certain extent. But I don't know what the outcome of that would be moving down the line. That's a lot of hard work, but something I think we can do if we are open to new ideas about how this gets accomplished. We have to be open to new ideas, much like my story back from my own doctoral work. Did I see another hand over here somewhere? Yes, I did.
With regards to curriculum innovations and interdisciplinary work and public engagement, do you have a graduate student task force that's thinking about these issues with you from the student perspective?
We do not. That's a great idea. It's a great idea. Thank you. We'll take that into consideration.
If you give me an RA with it.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry, I'm from Chicago. I know what extortion's all about. Okay. Seriously, give your name and your email to Liz. We'll be in contact with you. We love volunteers. Any other questions? If not, thank you again for being here. There's a reception downstairs. Please join us afterwards.